Okay, so today we're going to talk about recursive programming. Now, what is recursive programming? Well, a recursive function is a function that calls itself and keeps on calling itself until the job is done. So, what we're going to define is just a function that counts down the number you pass it until it reaches 0 and then finishes and outputs a little symbol. Okay, so define countdown, and it just has one parameter, the number that you pass it, and do a condition statement. If the number is 0, then it will finish its execution and just output a symbol. So check if the number is 0 and then output a symbol. Done. Okay, if it's not equal to 0, well then you need to keep on subtracting the number by 1 until it reaches 0. And this is how you do that. You call the function again, but instead of just passing the number in again, you pass down the number subtracted by 1. Pretty simple. Okay, so let's just try that in the interactions window. Whoops. Sorry, wrong button. Yeah, okay, so we'll just try it in the interactions window. Okay, so you can't really see it working, but you can sort of conceptualize how it works. It just keeps on passing in a lower number until the function, until the number finally reaches 0, and then the function finishes. Okay, so we're going to do something a little more easy to observe. Sorry. We're going to define a function that counts down the number you pass it, but also counts the even numbers that it encounters while it counts down. Okay, so define count evens num. Okay, now you may be asking, how are we supposed to count the evens if the only number that we pass in is the number that we're counting down? Well, that's why we need to define something called the helper function. Define count evens helper. And this one is going to have two parameters. It's going to have the number that you pass it, and it's also going to have count, which is going to be the number of evens it has encountered so far. Okay, so all count evens is going to do is call count evens helper. And it's going to pass in the number that you originally passed it, and because the number of evens that you're originally going to store is 0, it's going to start counting at 0. You have to pass in a 0 to count. Okay, so now on to the actual definition of the count evens helper function. Okay, so we'll just call the cond function. Do a cond statement. I'm going to leave the first one blank for now, and you'll see why in a second. Okay, so the number can either be odd or even. So let's check if it's even. And there is one more. Check if it's even. And check if it's odd. And as always, it will check each condition in the order that they appear in the code. Okay, so if it's even, then we want count to go up by 1. So we call count evens helper. And because we're counting down, we want the number you pass in to be subtracted by 1, just like you did in the original function that we defined. Okay, so num minus 1 and count plus 1. And if it's odd, we don't want count to go up by 1, but we do want num to go down by 1 because we're still counting down. So rather than passing in count plus 1, we just pass in count. And now we need to give what we call the base case for this first condition. The base case is the case that the function checks at the beginning of each execution, it basically determines whether or not the function is done, just like we did in the original countdown function here. Otherwise, it would just go on forever. Okay, so if num is equal to 0, then, well, I'm going to count 0 as an even number. I don't know if it officially is, but when you divide it by 2, you get an integer, so I'm going to count it as an even number. So return count plus 1. And that should work. Count evens 8. Okay, so there is 8, 6, 4, 2, and 0. So that's 5. So yeah, it works. Alright, so hope you enjoyed my tutorial, and I'll see you next time.